Everybody, Creative Katie here. Welcome to a art journal tutorial, and this one is part of the color scheme challenge. So here are the colors that I'm going to use. I'm using a deep red, cadmium orange, and cobalt turquoise, but you can pick any teal in there. Now I'm going to talk about the color blending book and give you a quick overview of that if you haven't seen it. I will put a link to that video where I go into depth. So basically what we're doing is swatching out the colors that are in the color scheme challenge. This gives us a permanent record of a color scheme, and some days when we're creating we can just flip through our color scheme book, find a color scheme and go with that. Decision made. But we're going to do a little bit more in this book. What we're going to do is also blend these colors so that we learn what happens when you blend them. So when I do the red and the orange, I get this coral color. If I add more orange or I add more red, you get a slightly different shade. What happens if you add white or black to it? And I'm just putting that all on this book, and this becomes a reference tool. The cobalt turquoise and the cadmium red makes this lovely purple with, when you mix it with white, gives you this lovely lilac-y soft color. Next page, when I do this color scheme, I'm going to mix these two paints. Now when I take the cobalt turquoise and the orange, I get a brownish green color. Now I decided that I wanted that coral color, so I'm going to mix the red, the deep red, and the orange. Now don't get too worried about the names of my specific brand of paints. Use the colors and the brands that you have. Now I'm mixing these right on the page, an ungesso page, with a little bit of white gesso, and I just find that that gives some differences in tone. Some gets a little darker, some gets a little lighter. And I really like this technique for putting that first layer of color down. It builds automatically some interest into the background without working too terribly hard to achieve it. So this is just the base coat. Now, if I wanted to do the turquoise with the red, this would make some purple backgrounds. And I think I might try that soon because you're going to get a very, very different look. I just want to add some lights in here, so I'm just playing around with a little bit of the leftover white gesso. Now we're going to add some pattern and some color. And the cobalt teal or turquoise that I'm using is a complementary color. So it is going to pop off the page. It is going to really show. Here I'm applying the acrylic paint to a piece of sink liner. And I will put some links in the description box below to some sink liners that I found on Amazon in case you're interested. They may provide great texture both on the gel plate and used basically as a stamp here. You can see how interesting they're just popping off of here. And I'm not worried about getting a perfect stamp. I just want some pattern in my background. I just want to build up those interesting layers. Loving the look. I'm loving the energy. This stencil is called Shape Landscape, and I use the 6-inch one as well as the 12-inch one. And I will link this in the description box below as well. I want to add some more pattern to my background. Now here I'm using the red. Now you can't see it, it's not in your face, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a place on your background. Not every element that you add is going to be up front. Some will take a back seat, but yet they're still very important because they're providing pattern and texture. Now this stencil is great because it has 4 different motifs or elements. I'm adding some black with the small circles here. Black is adding contrast to the page. as would white. So when you're selecting stencils, select stencils that have variety, different shapes, different motifs in amongst a overall pattern. Not sure what I want to do now, so I'm just edging my page with the black. I've got it on the makeup sponge, so I might as well use it up, right? Just adding a little bit more blank spaces. Turn the page to see, because right now, at this point, I don't even know which way I'm going, which orientation I'm going to go, landscape or the other, horizontal. So this is where I grab the the 12-inch of the same stencil. I wanted to add more of that turquoise, more up front. Because every time you add a layer, you push what's behind it back. So it's kind of a little bit of a dance. And I like using the same pattern, the circle, in two different sizes. That also adds interest, and it also makes for a very cohesive page. Now my page is seeming a little bit dark to me right now. So I want to lighten it up, and I'm going to add some contrast by using white acrylic paint. So here I'm applying the white acrylic paint to this sink liner, and you can see how that just instantly brightens it up. The sink liner is made of silicone, I would imagine, and it's just absolutely wonderful. And you have to put a little bit of pressure on it to get it to stamp a little bit more. And I'm just having fun. Building layers, adding interest. At this stage, my goal here was a color scheme challenge. I'm using these colors. I don't have an idea yet about what focal image I'm going to end up using. I just want to experiment with these colors. Adding where I think it's just empty. Not obviously knowing when to say when and when to stop. And that's a personal decision. So there is the page. And now the teal is a little bit, again, pushed back, and it's reading darker than I like. So I'm going to take that color, mix it with white gesso to get a lighter tone of basically the same color. And remember, when you're doing the color scheme challenge, you can do that with any of the colors. You can take just the red and add the white to it, or add black to it and see what happens and use that. So here is my lovely background. And it sat for a little bit because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. This is one of my cardboard coasters, and I like the shape. So I thought, you know what? I want to set off a focal image in the middle. So I am going to put a shape in the middle. In this case, this rounded square, and I'm going to paint this part out with that cobalt turquoise color. I really wanted that color to be more present on the page, and I felt that this was a way of doing it. Now I'm thinning it very ever so lightly. I traced this with my white Stabilo, and now I'm just painting this in. And the great part of this is that all that texture and pattern that's underneath shows. So I'm going to get the cobalt turquoise color, and I'm going to still be able to see all that pattern that we worked on getting in that background, as you can see. Now I could have gessoed that over and painted it so that I didn't see that pattern, but I wanted little hints of that to be there. So this is from my short and sweet sentiment pack, which are phrases and words and phrases, to 1 to 4 or 5 word phrases. And I printed off all the sentiments in with a white background and black lettering, or black background and white lettering. And here I'm going to use the black background with the white lettering and this clip art of this flower. And I'm going to keep the flower white because I like how that reads with the page. This is thinned down white paint, and I'm just splattering all over. Just add a little bit of white to that teal and have everything work very cohesively. I am loving the background. Not sure which phrase I want, so I'm, looking at both, auditioning one, auditioning the other. Here I'm taking a baby wipe and erasing that white Stabilo. It is water soluble, so I can lift it up. Its purpose was to just give me where I wanted to paint this square. That was it. So I didn't need it anymore. Once I decide on where I want the sentiment to go, where I want the focal image to go, I'm using my fluid matte medium. This is Liquitex Basics. You can get at the professional level as well. My favorite adhesive to use. Now, once that's dry, I'm going to do some of the finishing work. I am going to use my angle brush and use the floating acrylic technique to shade around the page. You could use a charcoal pencil to darken the edge. You can use uh, your Stabilo All pencil. You could use the makeup sponge and just make it dark. But I like putting that dark edge on as it frames the page. Now I'm doing the same around this center square, which the whole piece is now the focal image, not just the flower. And you can see how doing that shading is making it look like it's almost 3D, as if I actually glued the cardboard coaster on there. And there's this shadow around it. And I come back and I do a second layer if I want more shading, building it up to the level that I want to have the shading. I grabbed my fine line applicator with my white paint in it that has been thinned, and I'm just going to outline this. And I like how that looks. And then I decide to put a white border around my page as well. Here are close-ups. I hope you give this color scheme challenge a chance. Love to see it. Post it in my Facebook, Mixed Media Creations. I think I'm definitely going to go and take this challenge again and mix wet, the red, with the turquoise. It will give a very different page. Bye for now.